You notice those guys are starting that thing much too soon. Doesn't give me enough time to get up here. It's kind of like that big hook. Turn in your Bibles, if you would, to Matthew chapter 11, verse 28 through 30. 2 verses, 3 actually, just filled with all kinds of wealth for us, especially determining today's topic and trying to sort our way through and navigate some difficult issues. We're in a series called Questions, and we ask you to write in and to frame your question in questions my friend would like to ask the church or the pastor. And let me first of all say the reason this is important is our heartbeat is for people who are far from God. We feel it's the call of God on our lives to be ambassadors and to go out into our world and not just to preach at people, but to take them by the hand, one life at a time, and help them on their spiritual journey, that those who are far from God would come near to God. So everything we do, every decision that we make, every dime that we spend in this church is related back to, are we helping people far from God come near to God? Now, would you like to guess what the number one question? All right, we had a lot of questions, but what is the number one question that kind of came through the other questions? There's a common chord kind of intertwined between every query. And it's related to this truth right here. One of the number one barriers for people coming to faith in Christ is that they believe that religion is the enemy to fun. Right? Why would I ever want to become a Christian? Because at that point, all fun ends. The philosophy of fun in the Christian worldview is no fun at all. In fact, here's the way the question is worded. It's related to that philosophy of fun. Why can't I be free to live as I see fit as long as I don't hurt anybody? Okay, why can't I live as I see fit as long as I don't hurt anybody? Now, before I approach this from the passage and Jesus' own words, let's first of all look at this from a philosophical or pragmatic point of view. Does this work just in everyday life? Not that Jesus isn't pragmatic, but let's first take just a good look at the question itself. Here's the problem. Number one, why can't I live as I see fit as long as I don't hurt anybody? Because it's unworkable, because there are times in your life when what you want to do is in conflict with something else that you want to do. Think about it just for a moment. You can't eat whatever you want to eat and enjoy your grandchildren. If you eat cheeseburgers 3 times a day, you're not going to live long enough to tell the story. And when your grandchildren come along, you're going to be dead. You can't ride your bicycle without a helmet and expect to enjoy a long and productive, pain-free life. I'm a living, breathing testimony to this. You can't have a happy marriage and sleep with whomever you choose. A lot of guys have tried this, doesn't work. You can't succeed in school unless you put some restrictions on yourself and say no to drinking and partying and going out when you should be studying. You can't have good relationships, good friendships, unless you're restricting some of your impulses or movements. You can't be a great athlete if you don't restrict your diet and increase your level of exercise. The point is, this whole thing about I can do whatever I want as long as I don't hurt anybody, why can't I do that, is because life just simply doesn't work like that. A livable, happy, fulfilling life includes accepting enormous constraints on your life. So you can't do whatever you want because your wants will often conflict. In other words, you can't both ride a skateboard on the 210 and live. You can't do both. You're free to do them, but what you'll find yourself doing is using your freedom to take away your freedom. If you're dead, you're not really free to do what you want to do. Now, here's where the objection comes in when I have these conversations at some of our university campuses. Somebody will say, well, wait a minute, Pastor Jeff. These restrictions or restraints are the ones I've chosen, so that still makes me free by today's definition of freedom because I'm still doing what I want to do. The reality is that that's far too simplistic. If you think about it, from one standpoint, the way we define freedom today is different from the way we used to define it. Today, freedom is defined as a total autonomy, with no restraints or restrictions whatsoever. And we've never defined freedom like that. I can also understand why that this generation is a little bit suspect of authority. Think about it. They've grown up in a world where leaders have constantly lied to them, coerced them, manipulated them. So of course they're suspicious of some authority coming and saying, we think you ought to live this way. But the reality is, if you take the position that you should be able to do whatever you want to do, as long as it doesn't hurt anybody, the first fault is that there are simply some restrictions set up in life that you don't choose, they choose you. It's more you submitting to them in order that you may keep your freedom. Again, you're free to smoke like a chimney if you want to, but when you get COPD in your later life, which you will get, then you'll realize you've used your freedom to take away your freedom. Look, I'm 52 years old. It's amazing the way I thought when I was 32. I thought when I was 32 that one day by the time I'm 50, because when you're 30, 50's ancient. 50's like, what are you still doing here? You should be dead by now. And so when you're 30 or 32, I'm thinking, I can't wait till the day comes when I don't work anymore. And I can golf every day, and I can go mountain climbing, and I can go biking and hiking, and I can travel and see the world. And now at 52, I'm tired. I just want to go home and go to bed. So that by the time you have the freedom to do what you want to do, unless you've restricted yourself when you're young, you won't be able to. You just won't be able to be healthy enough to do the things you really want to do. If you refuse to submit to the natural order of things, you're going to end up riding a chair for the last 30 years of your life. But if you submit to them, you may end up like this woman who's 100 years old and still does push-ups. It all relates to design. What were you designed to do? And if you work within the design and you know the designer, that's where true freedom exists. It's like a sailboat. A sailboat's meant to sail on the open water at high speeds. But if you take the boat into shallow water and you face it in the wrong direction toward the wind, disintegration will set in. It will capsize. It will find itself floundering on the rocks. That's why I've said that if you violate the design, whatever it is in any area, disintegration will set in. And I read this passage a few weeks ago out of 1 Corinthians 6:18. Flee from sexual immorality. All other sins a person commits are outside the body, but whoever sins sexually sins against their own body. What's the point? The point is you were designed. You need to know the designer. You need to see the manual on you so that you know the appropriate ways to use it, so that disintegration does not set in. So we said that when a Christian says that sex is reserved between a man and a woman in the act of marriage, we don't do it because we want to be the big bad cosmic boss. We're trying to relate to you that this is the manual we've received from the Maker. And we know that if we live in these parameters, then we are truly free to enjoy life. Once you get outside of them, disintegration sets in. So human beings, knowing that we thrive in certain environments and break down in others, it's important to know who the designer is. So again, quickly, why can't I be free to live as I see fit as long as I don't hurt anybody? Because it's unworkable. There are simply some things you were not made to do. And if you do them, you'll end up using your freedom to take away your freedom. Here's the second reason. It's unfair. Every time I go on the internet, I see these, you know what I feel about selfies. Selfies, that's just what we call things because most of us can't spell narcissism. And so we take these selfies. And I see captions that say, I am responsible only to myself. No one has the right to tell me what to do. Now here's the problem with that. That would be true only if there had been no one ever invest in you. If you were totally self-made and were not dependent on anybody else for anything, then you would be truly free. And the question is, when is that ever true? Let me show you some additions to our church over the last few weeks. This is little Joel's baby, or Joel's little baby, I should say. Joel ain't little. He's a big dude. This is Ezra. And then we have Chloe, belongs to the Davises. And then we have Mac. This is Blake, our bass guitarist little boy. Then we have Wells, who belongs to Jeremiah. Looks just like him, I think. Then we have Graham and Mia and Merrick, all these little babies coming into the life of our church on staff. Isn't it beautiful? Now, would you like to know what all these kids have in common? They're not going to remember the first 5 years of their lives. Vague memories. And the reason is because somebody else is going to feed them, bathe them, change them, clothe them. And you want to know about the cycle of life? Let me tell you about the cycle of life. When you get older, somebody's going to feed you, bathe you, change you, clothe you. There's hardly ever a time in life, short period of time, where you're not totally dependent on other people, that they invest in you and you invest in them. Even now, when you're healthy, when you're injured or sick, you still depend on somebody else to take care of you. If you drive your bike without a helmet, your daughter will be forced to take care of you. In the real world, our lives are inherently dependent on others and subject to forces and circumstances beyond our control. But you say, but Pastor Jeff, why is it unfair to do whatever I want to do as long as I don't hurt anybody? Well, the answer is because you're not a product of self. In the movie Calvary, 2014, it's about a priest, a very faithful, honorable man, who has a daughter, and his daughter's trying to justify why it's okay for her to commit suicide. And she makes the statement in the movie, I belong to myself, not to anybody else. And his response to her is, that's true, but that's also false. Stay with me. You know, my high school basketball coach still calls me. It's been 30-some years, and he still calls me from time to time. And he says, you're special. Now, I don't know what he means by that. I choose to believe he's not referring to the size of bus that I took to school. But you're special. The first thing he asks me when he calls is, how is my investment going? You hear what he's saying? He said, are you leading your family well? Are you worshiping your God? Are you helping those who are less fortunate? Are you thanking the man upstairs? What's his point? He's checking on his investment. There are hundreds and hundreds of boys that he's coached through high school basketball, and he's wanting to know how his investments are doing. Because we belong to each other. No man is an island. Other lives have impacted us, and we impact other people. So notice how the priest responds to his daughter when she says, I belong to myself, not to anybody else, therefore I have the right to take my own life. He says, to commit suicide is to strike a blow and inflict a pain on many that will never be healed. The question is, what right do you have to darken their lives permanently? You're using your freedom to take away somebody else's freedom to live a peaceful life. Now, can I just take a time out and turn into an apologist just for a moment? You had to know this was coming. It's interesting to me when I was at Arizona State a few years ago with Ravi Zacharias in apologetic meetings. I had a student, many conversations, but a student said, I don't see what the problem is. I should be able to do whatever I want as long as I don't harm anybody. And he referred to that as that's our new morality. Tim Keller, in his book, Making Sense of God, New York Times bestseller, says freedom is sometimes said to be the only unconditional good our society agrees on. And it is argued the only one we really need. Why try to impose a set of moral rights and wrongs on everyone? This is the accusation people make against the Christians. We don't want to be like the moralistic societies of the past. Indeed, we should agree on just one thing, that everyone should be free to live as they desire as long as they don't harm anybody else. Does anyone see the inherent wrong in these statements? The first is this. You've not gotten rid of a moral code. You've just replaced the biblical moral code with your own personal moral code. And now you say that morality is based on the fact of whether you hurt anybody. Well, my question is, says who? And who says it's wrong to harm anybody? Where's your objective authority for that? I met a young lady in the fireside room a few weeks ago, and I could tell she wasn't really happy to be there, that somebody brought her against her will, probably her mother. And I looked at her and I said, hey, welcome, glad you're here. I don't think I recognize you. And she said, well, you don't recognize me because I don't come here. I said, okay. I thought, well, she's pretty bold. I can be bold back. Why don't you come here? And she said, well, I'm agnostic. I don't really believe in God. I said, well, are you agnostic or atheist? Atheist, you don't believe in God. There is no God. Agnostic, you say, well, you don't, but if you're open to the evidence. So are you open to the evidence? She said, what? So I can tell she hadn't thought this through. She goes, well, I don't come to church because I believe everybody should just be able to do what they want to do, as long as they don't harm anybody. And I said, okay, fine. Now tell me your definition of harm and give me your objective source so that whatever you believe is what I should believe. Or is harming somebody based on everybody's feelings and emotions? Who determines what hurt is my question. Is hurt physical, or does it include emotional and psychological hurt? Because if it does, that means if you cheat on your husband, that should be morally wrong, because you will hurt him. We know now that when two people are divorced, that kids aren't as resilient as we used to think in the 70s, that it does impact the kids. Now, I'm not here to make you feel guilty if you've been through a divorce. It's life and living. I'm simply saying, by those standards, that we should be able to do whatever we want as long as it doesn't hurt anybody. My goodness, everything we do hurts somebody. So it's not as morally free as you're trying to suggest that it is. The system of morality only works if we all agree on what constitutes harm. And how can we know what constitutes harm unless we define what good and thriving living is? And how can we define what good and thriving living is unless there's an objective source somewhere, a God, to tell us how we were designed and what works and what doesn't work? It ties back to those 4 questions of origin, meaning, morality, destiny. You have to know the designer to know how you're designed, to know what harms you and what does not. It can't be subjective. So it's hypocritical when I meet someone that says, well, I live by my own moral code as long as I don't harm anyone. So what you're doing is you're forcing a new morality on me. And that's the thing you're complaining about, the Christians, that they force their morality on you. There's a fundamental problem in America. We claim as though morals are subjective, that right and wrong is determined by each individual. But we don't live that way. Think about it. What is the number one protesting university in America? Berkeley. Berkeley, that is the number one protesting university, and they protest everything. Now, here's the problem. In their ethics classes, they teach that no one should have to believe, when it comes to morality, what somebody else believes, that morals, right and wrong, are left up to each individual. Well, if that's true, why are you protesting anything? By nature of you protesting something, you're assuming that somebody's morality is not right. You're claiming that injustice does indeed exist. I don't get it. First you tell me I have the right to believe what I want to believe about the world, and everything else I can establish my own moral code, and then you protest against me when your moral code doesn't agree with mine. See, we claim it, but nobody lives that way. Why can't I be free to live as I see fit as long as I don't hurt anyone? Number one, it's unworkable. There are simply some things you're not made to do. Number two, it's unfair because it denies the reality that people have invested in you, you've invested in others. Three, it's unimaginable because we're never going to agree on what hurt is. As a matter of fact, think about it. If we defined morality that way, isn't it true that we not only tolerate adultery in America, we glamorize it? But I thought you said that we shouldn't ever do anything that hurts another person. It's not consistent. Here's the fourth reason. It's uncouth. Now, this is where we turn third and we start headed home. I need your undivided attention. These are some heavier thoughts, but I promise if you stay with me, that when we hit home plate, it'll become clear, and I think it'll be gold because it comes from Jesus, not from me. We are free to love, aren't we? That's a beautiful thing about living. You can choose who you're going to love. It's your choice. It's a wonderful and glorious thing to be in love and to be loved. If you're honest with yourself, you know that ultimately that's what we're all looking for. Someone to have all the goods on us and still love us. But as soon as you get into a love relationship, and the deeper and more intimate that you become, the more wonderful love becomes. But there's something else that comes with love. You give up your independence. You can't have one without doing the other. Let me give you the example again. Let's say after the third service today that I get in my car and I start driving toward Vegas. And I'm not home about 7 o'clock at night. And my wife, Robin, calls me and says, Jeff, honey, where are you? Now imagine my response being, I don't have to tell you where I am. You're not the boss of me. I belong to myself. I can do whatever I want. No one has the right to tell me or determine how I live. Now, for those of you who know Robin, there will be a silence on the other end of the line. And then I would imagine something like, do you know how close you are to the end of your life? You know what I'm saying? You can't be completely free the way we want to define freedom, total unrestriction, and simultaneously be in a strong love relationship. In marriage, if one or both parties say or act like, hey, me first, my needs first, it's about me, then the relationship ultimately will struggle and die. But if there's mutual submission, where both parties habitually say, you know what, you first, sweetheart, I will adjust for you. I'll sacrifice my needs to meet yours. If both are doing that, then there's no exploitation. And there's a relationship of great richness that is in store the more you grow in love. Now, here's the key to this message. The mutual sacrifice of autonomy leads to a wonderful kind of liberation that only love can bring. Bring that up there again. The mutual sacrifice of autonomy, in other words, I'm giving up my autonomy, you're giving up yours, leads to a wonderful kind of liberation that only love can bring. How can that be true that by giving up my freedom to do whatever I want to do, that I end up finding that I'm incredibly liberated? And how do we know that only love can bring that kind of liberation? Now, stay with me. This is where you got to walk with me through this. And I see a lot of my young staff is here, and so you really need to focus in on this, okay? When I was younger, for most of my life, the most free that I felt during a weekend is on Sunday night around 7 o'clock. For about a period of, say, 12 hours, I felt incredibly free. Here's why. Because for the first years of my ministry, my significance, my self-worth, my self-esteem was all tied to how well I did on the weekend. Okay? So if I walked off the stage after a weekend and I went home and I felt I had done a good job, then I felt valuable. I felt that my life had purpose and meaning. And so for those few hours, I was no longer trying to get those kind of things from things that were never meant to deliver them. Or was I? See, pastors fall into this trap as well. So my hope, my purpose, my significance, everything was tied to my job. That's a horrible life to live. Because I would only have a few hours of peace until Monday morning came, and guess what happened? It all started again. We in the ministry call it getting pregnant on Monday and delivering every Sunday. That's what it's like to get a sermon. You're pregnant and you got to deliver, and you do it over and over and over again. And then as I got older, things changed. I fell deeper and deeper in love with my wife. And then I started to notice that this may be a deposit or kind of like an installment in a greater capacity. Because I noticed that the more I fell in love with my wife, the less I needed everything else in the world that I thought could give me the things that only my wife could give. Because she would love me unconditionally. My significance and my purpose and my meaning and my self-esteem and self-worth came from my love relationship with her. And yet still something was missing, but I was getting closer. You see? So now, because I had in my relationship with my wife the things I was looking for, the things that we're ultimately all looking for, what happened is I started to experience the things that previously I had used as a means to give me self-esteem, self-worth, value. I started to use those more in an appropriate fashion. So I still love my job, I still love doing this, but I don't get my significance or self-esteem or self-worth out of it because I have that to a great degree at home in my marriage and with my family. My relationships take on new meaning too. I don't use people and my friends as a means to an end. I actually invest in them because I don't need to get out of them what I used to have to get out of them. Now I get that out of my wife and kids, so I actually treat them well. And my hobbies take on new meaning. I don't play golf to show all my friends I can beat them. I don't need to win at golf to feel like I have value, that I have self-esteem and self-worth. Now I actually enjoy the game. I enjoy the game now more than I ever have because I'm not misusing it and expecting it to deliver something that it is impossible to deliver. Now, here's where all this comes together. You cannot live without love. It's impossible. There's something in you that this void can only be filled by a love relationship. Everybody in the room loves someone or something. And your ultimate self-esteem and self-worth is tied to that thing. Everyone has a supreme love, and that is the person or the thing that gives meaning and purpose to their lives. It's your career, a political cause, money, position. Whatever it is in your life that brings you the greatest satisfaction is the thing that you're going to tie yourself to in hopes that it will deliver what you're ultimately looking for. Self-worth, self-esteem, purpose, meaning, the thing we're all after. And so that thing that you've tied yourself to in hopes that it will deliver those things to you, you begin to worship. You will serve it. You will obey it. You will worship it. This is where our society's in trouble because modern people are in complete denial that we are all driven by something, and thus every single one of us in the room is in a slave-master relationship. Everybody has a master, and everybody's slave to something. And it's the thing that you think is going to deliver your self-worth and self-esteem. Let me tell you, pastors are the worst. They are. They get their self-esteem out of people approval, and they tie themselves to it. So they go through seasons in their life where they feel miserable, dejected because they think they're not succeeding. And when you tie your self-esteem to the number of people in your church, man, you're really in trouble. Not only because it'll never deliver, but because you start treating people as a commodity, as a means to your end. You're not really concerned about them. You're just concerned about the seat and how many people are in them. That's a horrific temptation. Everybody loves and worships something. Everybody in this room is in a master-slave relationship. There is no such thing as autonomy in the sense of total freedom without any restrictions. You're serving something or someone, whether you're willing to admit it or not. Listen to David Foster, who's an Australian. He's a postmodern novelist. He's not a Christ follower. Listen to these words. He says, in the day-to-day trenches of life, he says, there's no such thing as not worshiping. Everybody worships. The only choice we get to make is what to worship. And an outstanding reason for choosing some sort of God, he says, or spiritual thing to worship, is that pretty much anything else you worship will eat you alive. If you worship money and things, if they are where you tap real meaning in life, then you'll never have enough, never feel you have enough. Worship your own body and beauty and sexual allure, and you'll always feel ugly. And when time and age start showing, you will die a million deaths before they finally plant you. I am living proof of disintegration. Worship power. You will end up feeling weak and afraid, and you will need even more power over others to keep the fear at bay. Worship your intellect. Be seen as smart. You will end up feeling stupid, a fraud, always on the verge of being found out. There is a default setting in everybody in this room. Whatever is your source of meaning and satisfaction in life, that is the thing you're worshiping. That is your master, and you are its slave. Whatever it is you're living for, you have to have it. Don't you understand that's why you're so depressed and anxious and angry? Because that thing that you've tied your life to, that master, you can never do enough. Cynthia Heimel, writing for the New York newspaper, a journal, and I think I've used this before, but she says she knew most of the Hollywood stars before they were stars. She knew them when they were blue-collar workers, and let's face it, most of us place a halo around the head of those in Hollywood. We think, man, if we could just have that, be like them, be on the big screen, then, man, we would be at peace. We'd have everything we want. You never stop to think about the suicide rate, the drug rate, the divorce rate. Something's going on over there. She says she knew them when they were struggling to make ends meet and playing the only if game, only if my ship would come in. She said in those stages, they were occasionally stressed or driven, frustrated with common tendencies toward anger and maybe hostility. She says that's how people are when they don't have the thing they think will make everything all right. She says, but when they finally get what they want, they become awful. When their ship comes in, they become unstable, angrier, manic, and unhappier. She says, I pity celebrities. I really do. Celebrities were once perfectly pleasant human beings, but now their wrath is awful. They wanted fame, so they worked, pushed, and shoved. Yet the morning after each one of these became famous, they wanted to take an overdose because that giant thing that was going to make everything okay, make their lives bearable, give meaning and purpose to their lives, happened, and they were still them. The disillusion turned them howling and insufferable. The thing that you love, the thing you trust in, the thing you think gives you meaning, hope, and purpose in this life and in this world, if you don't get it, you'll become suicidal because your very identity is at stake. I just finished reading the Bill Qureshi's book on Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus. He's with Ravi Zacharias International Ministries. Interesting book. He was raised Muslim, Islam, knew the Quran very well and the teaching of his imam. But he met a friend in college that gave him the objective arguments of why the Bible can be trusted and why Jesus brought abundant life. Because Nabil is so clever, so smart, very high intellect, and has become a New York Times bestseller on numerous occasions. He says in his book that even when he started to see that Jesus was indeed coherent in his teaching of origin, meaning, morality, destiny, and that Jesus was indeed the way to life, he said, even when he came to understand that these were objective truths that could not be denied, he said, I still could not become a Christian because my identity was at stake. I am a Muslim. Everything that I am, I have been created and molded and shaped by my community and culture. To become a Christian would mean I would have to start all over. I would lose my very self. And the more I read, the more I thought of John 3 when Nicodemus comes to Jesus and Jesus says to him, Nicodemus, you can't even see the kingdom of heaven until you're born again. Nicodemus, you got to start all over. And he said to his friend, must I have a new identity, a new me? And the answer was yes. And he started all over. Man, when you attack somebody's identity, man, that's why religious people get so angry. You're not just attacking their theology or philosophy, you're attacking their identity. But religious people, that's with anyone. And that's why when you make a statement like this, someone will come along and say, Pastor Jeff, that right there is why I don't like religion. But you're missing the point. There's no such thing as a non-religious person. There's no such thing. Everyone places their hope and meaning into something. Their security and meaning into something or someone. Their love, their meaning, their satisfaction in their lives. Everyone is under the control of something they think is going to deliver. That's religion. Everyone serves a master they hope will give them what they want. No one is masterless. No one is truly free. We all serve, trust in, and obey something. We are all in a master-slave relationship. And now we can read what Jesus has to say in Matthew. Come to me, all you who are laboring and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Now, we went in the side door. Give me just a few more seconds here, okay? We read the passage, and then today, we're just kind of lazy, so it doesn't appeal to us like it has in generations in the past. Because we say, wait a minute, Jesus says my yoke is easy, but I vote for no yoke at all. Jesus said, come to me, my burden is light. Well, I vote for no burden at all. That's the guy I'm looking for. But a burden-free, yoke-free life is impossible because we're all slaves to some master. We're all driven. That's what a yoke does, remember? It ties the oxen together and drives them. Everybody's tied to something that we hope will take us in the direction of fulfillment and satisfaction of the soul. And whatever we think that is, more money, more stuff, about love, a marriage, whatever, that's the thing that drives us. And we're all carrying a burden because that puts a weight on us by the master. Whoever, whatever we serve, it burdens us down. And here is Jesus' simple challenge in Matthew 11. If that's true, then the ultimate question everyone should ask is which master will affirm, cherish, empower, and honor us, and which ones will exploit and abuse us? Which master can we trust to give us the type of constraints that will truly make us free? Because all masters will require something. Which master is the right master that we can give our hearts and our lives to, that we can trust? You're free to jump off a cliff, but you will not bounce. So you want somebody to tell you what you shouldn't do, not to be the big bad cosmic boss, so that you can truly live. If you live for stuff, your soul will die. If you use your job as a means to self-worth and self-esteem, when you get to the top, you'll be amazed at how overwhelmingly disappointed you are with this overwhelming sense of despair. If you put all your hope and trust in marriage, that one day if you can just be married, let me tell you, marriage is a precursor to what God can do, but it won't deliver ultimate satisfaction, meaning, hope, and purpose. If you serve your career will crucify you with self-loathing every time you fail. If you serve your body, it will crucify you with self-destruction. Because you will age, and you will get little auxiliary arms. And your waist will spread, and your hairline will recede. If you serve every untamed passion without parameters, you're going to be like the sailboat that smashes up against the rock. If you use your body in a way that it was never meant to be used, if you don't follow the design manual, disintegration sets in. Now here's where somebody says, well, hold on, Pastor Jeff, it's my boat. So if I want to destroy it on the rocks, it's my business. That would only be true if you were self-sustaining, and you're not. You depend on others, others depend on you. Whatever decision you make, to a degree, impacts everyone. And that's why even suicide leaves wounds that you don't have the right to leave. What's the answer then? Oh, here's where the beauty of this passage comes. Choose a master that will not exploit you, who always delivers what he promises. Serve the master who's already proven your worth by dying on a cross for you and giving you ultimately that which you're searching for. Safety, security, and hope eternal. A significance that never fades, a worth that never dissipates, a meaning and purpose that always rings true because none of these things are based on you. Where are you in this? How do we know what master to choose? It should be the one who made us and designed us, and the one who's shown that he will do whatever it takes to help those far come near, even if it means giving up his own son. Now, I've got to finish this, but I need you to focus here. This is one of those messages all week. I really struggled. I actually walked in here on the first message on Saturday. I was just tired, intellectually just worn out trying to think my way through this. So I'm kind of going to leave the page here a little bit, and I'm going to look into your eyes, and let me talk to you just a second about what all that means. There is no way that you can truly enjoy all that God has given us until you are rightly related to him. See, because in the same way, when I'm rightly related by love to my wife, then I use the things of the world in appropriate fashions. Then when I'm in a right relationship with God, where my significance, my security, my hope, my trust is all in him, then it allows me to be so much more free to use all the things God has given in appropriate fashion for true enjoyment. Let me give you an example. And I'm always afraid that somebody's going to misunderstand what I'm saying here, so I really need you to give me some grace here. Okay? Sex, alcohol, drugs, rock and roll. Okay? those things are not inherently wrong. Sex in the context of marriage is a beautiful, wonderful thing. Alcohol. Now, this is where I get in trouble, but I'm assuming that since Jesus turned the water into wine, okay, drugs. There's not a day that goes by that I don't thank God for this little pill called Zoloft. Rock and roll. The Eagles. The point I'm making is, when you're rightly related to God, you're free to use those things as they were meant to be used to flourish in freedom. If you're not rightly related to God, not only will you not know the correct way to use these things for pleasure and enjoyment, but they will end up being your master, and you will end up serving them, and they will always let you down. And when somebody comes along and says to me, well, Pastor Jeff, I get what you're saying. You're saying I got to trust God for these parameters, and yes, you're right, I am saying that. But there's something else about this. It's hard to know what we Christ followers feel as long as you're on the outside looking in. And you only come on the inside when you actually begin to acknowledge and trust Jesus as your Savior. Then a beautiful journey begins, and it's like this. For us Christians, somewhere along the line, duty became a choice. When I was dating my wife, Robin, I was amazing. I mean, I would send her red roses all the time. I mean, I never wanted her to return to her dorm room after class without having a red rose of some kind waiting. I mean, now I wasn't wealthy, and my family wasn't wealthy, so that required a lot of sacrifice to pay for roses. When people get married in my hometown, they all take their newly wed wife to Pigeon Forge, Dollywood. And I was determined that I was not going to take my new wife to Dollywood. And so I worked all summer, man, long hours, sun up to sundown, man, seriously, and saved all the money I could so I could take her on this beach vacation. Even now, at Christmas time, I'm not so concerned with what gifts I get. Whatever I get, that's nice. But my greater concern is seeing the look on her face when she opens her Christmas present. Other than the Nutrisystem here, I'm right on. But this happened because I love this woman, Robin. And so any duty that I have has now become joy and choice. I choose to sacrifice. I choose to give up my rights to meet her needs. There's only one master that's going to treat you like that. There's only one master that you fall in love with first. And because you fall in love when you realize all that he's done for you, your happiness gets put into his happiness. So the things that give you the most joy are the things you know bring a smile to the face of God. See, the problem with most of us, if I can just be honest, is we're not in love with God. We just have a loophole that we think that we can earn some kind of salvation by being good, and that will get us into heaven. What he wants is your heart. Because if he has your heart, everything else will follow. Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. It is a yoke, for I'm gentle and lowly in heart. You will find rest for your souls, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Yes, Jesus gives you precepts to follow, but they are not arbitrarily given. They're motivated out of love for you, that you could have the best life possible on this planet by living within the huge sandbox God has given you to play in, knowing that when you get outside the wooden boards, you start to live in a way that you were never designed to live, and disintegration sets in. That's the God of the Bible, very unique. the Savior who will forgive you of all your sins, past, present, future, but your Heavenly Father who's pulling for you, because he wants to give you all the joys and the freedoms now that one day will become a reality in heaven when sin is totally removed. You get to choose your master. Choose wisely. Father, thank you for the power of your word. Thank you that you can confront us with truth out of love. I pray for every person in this room at Etiwanda Gardens, at our Lone Hill campus, those on our online campus, those who follow us down in the South Pacific, everyone in the range of this voice. I pray that we would have a passion to look deep inside ourselves and ask a simple question. What am I doing now that is bringing death into my life? What am I using that's a gift from God, but I am using it in illegitimate ways where it will never deliver what I think it might deliver? I pray that those who wonder why we just can't do whatever we want to do without hurting anybody would have seen today it's unworkable. That there must be an objective truth that leads to life. Help us to find him in Christ, to obey and to trust, so that our lives may be free, truly free. For who the Son makes free, we are free indeed in Christ. Amen.